Hey folks, we're back with the Turnkey 365 ERP Academy, and today is a great one. Last episode we talked about items, but usually when we need to build stuff, the item ain't enough, right? That gets you the things you want to talk about: inventory, costing, all the different aspects of the individual items. But what happens when you need to make them? Well, those of us who know manufacturing, we know bills of material, and that is our topic for today: is bills of material. And as usual, I am joined by our guests, the amazing talent we have here at Turnkey Technologies, Kurt Quiggle and Bob Richardson. Gents, welcome. Good afternoon. Glad to
Hey,
have you.
welcome.
Afternoon.
Very cool. So, bills of material. As I said to you in the prep, this is something I geek out over. My first job decades ago was running a design department, and bills of material were truly, truly my everyday life in every way. I had so many of them memorized. It's kind of frightening to think about, but I guess those who are engineers can identify with that. So, let's get into it. Let's just quick before we get into the show and tell here. Let's just talk a little bit about the bills of material. So, Kurt, let's start with you. When we talk about the bills of material, what is it that we're trying to include in a bill of material? What is it that's important to understand in terms of that
Absolutely.
manufacturing requirements?
Yep. You gotta think back to where I started my career, right? I started my career in a dairy. So bill of material to me is a recipe, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that same logic applies whether you're making ice cream or
Mm-hmm.
you're making a medical component, right? It's really a
Mm-hmm.
recipe to put together our finished good.
Mm-hmm.
All the way through, as you know, our earlier conversations today, we spoke a little bit about routings and the sequence of events that have to happen. Again, those are the steps of the recipe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when do you add what? So our bill of material to me is that, again, that recipe card around how I'm going to put something together.
I love the comment that you made there about when and at what time or when you're going to put what. So we're going to not go too deep into routings today, but it's a very interesting concept of when, because depending on the manufacturing paradigm and the organization, I can take all of my material, I can gather it all once, and it can move throughout all of the processes at once. Then someone might have another paradigm where only the material that's needed at that process is what is moved, relative to that work order and the product in process.
Yep.
And so it's a really important step, and it is, certainly an important part of the bill of material in terms of at what routing step is it required, and hopefully we'll see some of that. So, Bob, we also talked about, just again a relatively simple example of some medical equipment that where they're outsourcing all of the manufacturing, and this product, and it could be a very, 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 very complex product. We're going to break it down to something simple today, but the concept of simple assembly orders in terms of for service and or configuration and that sort of thing. Can you tell us a little bit and talk to us a little bit about those simple bills of material and what folks can expect out of that?
Sure. We're focused today on assembling knee implants for
That's
resale.
because we're showing
But
off.
that's yeah, we are. We are. But what I did was make the three separate items that go into a knee replacement: the tibial, the femoral, and there's the kneecap essentially. Um, but there wasn't a lot of information that had to be generated to put those items in Business Central and
Hmm.
then start doing the manufacturing required to get them ready to assemble into a kit, essentially,
Hmm. Hmm.
as one packaged need.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know that we're going to get through the whole assembly process, but just setting it up was
Well,
a
well,
little
that's an
fun.
interesting concept. The concept of building something
Mhm.
or assembling something into a kit. And that's really kind of where I want to get in a little deeper with these assembly, with what we refer to as assembly bombs, because you're not technically building anything, right?
Right.
You know, an assembly BOM or a kit is an entirely different animal. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yes. It, things can be sold either pre-assembled as a manufactured item, or
Hmm.
they can be sold as like box furniture, where all the pieces come with instructions ready for the end user to assemble. That would be called a kit.
Hmm.
And Business Central can handle those scenarios pretty easily. It's just a matter of, you know, generating the items in the system that are sold complete,
Hmm.
already assembled, or sold as a package deal as a recurring sales group item, for instance. But it's pretty user friendly to get those set up and out the door.
And
Yeah,
you,
and
you
I feel like I feel like you just tasked me. I feel like I have an assembly. You know, I'm gonna have to go to IKEA and get some furniture this weekend and
yeah.
assemble it. So you gave me the shakes.
Yeah, yeah. There's better ways to spend a weekend, I think, especially in the summer. But if you need it, you need it.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully I don't need it. All right. So let's get into a little show and tell here. So Bob, why don't you start first this time?
Sure. I'll share my screen. All right. Here we are in Business Central. I'm signed in as a manufacturing manager, so I have what I need at my fingertips as far as looking at production orders, getting to the product design components, and that's where I'll find the item list. So if I go into that, I have a pretty lengthy list of items, and it's loading now, that I can filter them down pretty quickly with the search bar. If I type in implant, I think is going to, yeah, get me where I need to go. I have the three implant items set up. Um, and you can see that the list shows me that I have the BOM already generated and a routing to make a tibial implant. And we can look at how this item is set up.
And for the folks who are watching this, what we're talking about today is a quick little bill of material, three parts that would make up a an implantable knee for those who need to get their knee replaced.
Correct. And I will fess up that I don't have the final assembly item set up. I've just got the three components that would go in. I I chose to focus on getting the bill of materials set up to actually purchase uh, an unmilled tibial implant, and I'm going to put it through the process to actually size and polish uh, the implant. But here we are in the tibial implant item card. And we went through how to set up an item earlier, but I did make the replenishment as a production order, and I set it to make to order. So when a sales order comes in for an implant, this is going to be applied to that order. And I've got a routing and a production BOM assigned to this. And we can look in here or up on the item tab. I can look at the BOM structure, and there's not going to be a lot to look at here since it's just a very simple bill of materials. But here it is. So the BOM structure is I'm making the tibial implant. I'm starting with a medium base and I'm sending it to the machine department for final sizing and polishing. So that's what's set up.
Okay, and what are
And,
the components, and what are the things that we need to enter in that bill of material for for that item that's going into the larger or the assembly item?
well, the end product is this top bold line, the tibial implant. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that I'm purchasing and running through the bill of materials is this tibial base medium. So
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be used for a medium sized knee replacement. And the
Mm-hmm.
machine department is going to make sure that it's polished and sized correctly. And, and you'll notice that this work center is showing up in the bill of materials structure because I linked the routing to the bill of materials so that items and um, machine centers or work centers travel together.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And so we have to include, in this case, we're including a quantity, okay, a quantity of one, which means
yes,
in this case we're getting a blank, okay, or we're getting a something that may be precast or die cast, and then we would machine that to size. And of course, you've indicated it as a medium because we wouldn't want too much material in there. Now,
right.
this could also conceivably have been made from bar stock. Okay, in which
It could.
case we would need to, we would put in some sort of unit of measure that will be different. Right now, you're looking at a quantity of one each, okay, or one piece. And then, but if we were doing this in a material length, it would be in some other unit of measure. And how would you handle that?
In the item card itself, I can set up the different units of measure.
Okay.
But here is the production BOM itself. And
Mm-hmm.
I could have chosen different units of measure to process with. If it's not set up, I can do it from here. I can't do it while the bill of materials is certified.
Of course.
But yeah, I can add multiple items here. I can even add some comments if I don't
Mm-hmm.
choose um, something else.
Well, that's it. I'm going to, boy, there's a lot to unpack here. But I love the status. We'll get to that. But if I think about this, if we're going to use something on the order of inches, or if we were doing some sort of process manufacturing, we might use weight or some amount, something like that. But I love the concept of scrap there,
Yes,
in that there's always going to be some scrap. If we're machining something, okay, we're going to, and say it's on a lathe, we're going to have to hold it. Okay.
right.
And so often people start out and they actually guess at what those numbers are. But over time, you can actually measure and find out how much material I'm using to get X number of pieces output. And you can input that in this case as a percentage, which I love that entire concept. Likewise, with anything in which you're doing that in weight, you could do the same exact thing.
Exactly.
And
The scrap percent doesn't mean so much when you're working in pieces, but if you're
yeah.
working in feet, pounds, etc., it certainly does. Yeah,
Well, I've been in situations where some of the pieces get ruined in processing. And
they do.
so
They do.
that can actually happen. It's rare, and it's a ridiculous cost sink, and I hope it's a priority for any company in their quality processes to ensure that they can keep that scrap at 0% when you're working in pieces. But it certainly can happen, particularly early on in a production life cycle for a product, where you actually destroy some things in the process. Maybe it's a research and development bill of material, or just the low rate of initial production bill of material, where you might have that kind of scrap where you're going to lose. Heck, you could use half the items, and you have to account for them. Otherwise, your inventory and your planning are thrown way the heck off.
Exactly.
So,
And another use for this, especially in a piece item, this is a purchased item. So if you find that your scrap percentage is pretty high, it might be time to talk to the vendor about it too.
it
What
sure
can they
might.
do on their end to get
It
that
sure
number
might.
down for you? Yeah.
So talk to me about that status field.
There's when you're setting a new one up, it starts off as new,
Mm-hmm.
and when you think you have it ready, you can certify it, and
Mm-hmm.
then the production order, we'll know it's ready to process.
Mm-hmm.
But once you certify it, you can't make any changes to it
Mm-hmm.
because it's already assigned to or ready to process. But if you do want to change it, you can come back here and make it under development and
Mm-hmm.
process changes that you may feel that are appropriate, and then recertify it so that it's ready for use in production. So
And who has the
well,
ability to do this certification? Is that controlled by roles?
it can be controlled by roles, permissions, etc. Um, but it's a nice block. If the engineering department is working on some changes to a particular item, just by taking it off certified, make sure that production is not going to be able to use it at that point. That it's
Okay.
under development still.
Okay. And then the version numbers. Okay. Tell me about
Yes.
that.
Um, if I want to track versions, the version number here is a numbering system to keep track of the versions. But if you really want to make a new version, you click here and it will open up a new version card that allows you to change the bill of materials. You can copy what's in the bill of materials there and bring it in and add to it. Um, there's options here, and it tracks through. Once you make this the active version,
Mm-hmm.
then the production orders and all will automatically be switched to that version.
And I love the concept of the starting date that's in there. So
Yes,
that back in the day, the system I worked on, we called it the effectivity date, where the bill of material would change and you might change a component. So we've talked about items where an item from you might change supplier, or you might change a design, or the revision of the component, the revision of the item might change. And I think that revision of the item is really, really important because we're not talking about the revision, say a drawing revision or a bill of material revision here. We're talking about different bills of material to potentially represent the same thing. And that's where that starting date would come in that,
exactly.
I'm making a change and I have to have some order to avoid chaos in terms of how we implement that in the product lifecycle management process. So as opposed to the revision, which would be stored in the item, if I'm not correct, or if I'm correct. Yeah.
Yes, and having the versions available means if you don't like the last version change, you can always go back to an earlier version of the bill of materials and
Mm-hmm.
and use it until you come up with something that does seem to work better for you.
And are there notifications that are possible based on the changes of the status?
I'm not sure that there are in the production environment. There are when you get to the production orders themselves, I believe that you can. Well, let's get to it a different way. Um,
Well, what I'm
no,
getting at there is that this might be the perfect opportunity to implement Power Platform features that are part of the Microsoft Dynamics 365 suite. So,
yes,
which even if you clearly that workflow is really, really crucial. So based on the features that are available in Business Central, you can use that, but then we can also do more complex workflows with low code or no code Power Platform based on changes in field data, among other things. That would kind of create the notifications and workflows that we want and need. And it's one thing to implement them, but sometimes these things change. Email addresses might change in the workflows or something like that. And it's nice to be able to make those adjustments and keep up to date in real time as folks proceed forward. I'm trying to speak to the engineering audience here and help them to understand it's not just about creating the bill of material, it's about creating a bill of material and how it works within your department.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll notice that on the role center for the manufacturing manager, there are some approval tiles, we call them, that tell you if something's been sent for approval or coming back for the manager to approve.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really like about all these tiles, it gets you focused right away when you log in. It tells you
Mm-hmm.
what orders may need attention, uh, etc. So it's just a very handy way to get started on your day. But you'll notice that I have a release production order right now. So let's take a
Mm-hmm.
look and see where that gets me. And it
Well, and this is
takes
where the
me
rubber
to
hits
the
the road, of course. We don't just put these bills of material in just because we like the look of them. It's about the sharing of
exactly
data and information. And those tiles are about that. So, what has somebody shared with me? What is actionable for me today or someone else under my charge?
exactly yes. But here is the one production order for a tibial implant, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't have to process it fully, but at least we have a chance to look at what all happens when we're generating a production order. Uh,
Well, you read my mind.
all right. So here we are. I created this production order just by entering the part number and how many I want to make. And that's
Mm-hmm.
step one. And then I can refresh the production order and it auto loads all the BOM and routing information that needs to come in with that. And then from this line, I can look at what routing is being used to produce this. And there it is. Um, just a simple work center sending it through the machine department for sizing and polishing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the components come in from the bill of materials. There they are, letting us know quantities that are expected uh, to be in the production area for the manufacturer. Um, and then once the guys are through manufacturing the item, we go to the production journal and we can process it, run the consumption report essentially. So it's
Mm-hmm.
going to consume one of those bases and it's going to output one of the final products.
I can't
So,
help but think that somebody like a contract manufacturer is incredibly envious right now because the one item bill of material is real. It happens in a machine shop, but the guys
oh, it
making a
does,
complex electronic product, their head's about to explode. What do you mean, one item?
yeah. Well, yeah, I was trying to keep it simple, just going through the process as well.
Absolutely.
But I can post this from here. I don't want to yet because I want to make sure that the manufacturing managers out there get a feel for what kind of paperwork is available to send out to the shop floor, and it's available. If I click on reports right above the list of orders that I have waiting for us, it'll generate a report that lists what they need to have and what work center they need to work at. So
Very good.
it's
And
all there.
that's all coming from that bomb. Love that.
Yes,
All
it
right,
is.
let's switch gears. Let's switch gears over to GP and let's take a look at that.
All right. It's kind of interesting. We meet, we talk about what we're going to present, and we both go our separate ways, and come back to the table, and we see what we've put together, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
And it's kind of, I find it very interesting in the sense of what we both come back with.
Yes, I look forward to this.
And we'll see here that again, I'm in Microsoft Dynamics GP, and very mature product
Mm-hmm.
that has evolved over you know as many years as I've been consultant, right? And
Mm-hmm.
slowly but surely these things have happened. But again, we had our brief conversation. We talked about a bill of material around a full knee replacement. And Bob and I aren't, in the medical industry, but we are folks who understand manufacturing. We understand ERP systems. And amazingly, like I said, these developed independently. And what you're going to find out is they're very similar. So, um, from that perspective, let's just take that quick step here and make sure I have a bill of material. I just called it full knee. And that bill of material, again, everything in our ERP systems, when we talk about the bill of material or our manufacturing order or what we're doing, always falls back to an item or an inventory component.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are tasks we can do. There's labor that can be assigned within our work centers, within our machines, etc. But the components ultimately are item numbers, including what we're building.
Mm-hmm.
So again, my item number for a full knee, when I drill back in GP, which we have the ability to do to get all the way down to, again, here's my engineering information. We make these to stock.
Mm-hmm.
And if I drill back again into the item number itself, that tells me that little bit more about the item, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In that sense of, again, that top level of the bill of material.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the components that make up the bill of material, I was trying to get into the traceability needed within, our medical arena and our food arena, where as I add components to a bill of material and process them, I need to be able to track that serial number.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the items that have been added here, GP gives us a great indicator right in front of it that is a serialized item that's being tracked. Other little key indicators, that little red star says that is a purchased component. Just again, it's a part we're buying, we're putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, our plastic plate that we're going to utilize again between the two metal components, that may need to be built. So here we have a sub assembly within the
Mm-hmm.
bill of material.
Mm-hmm.
And again, along the lines of what's being consumed, I did the same thing Bob did. I used eaches, even though
Mm-hmm.
I knew I should have been thinking along the lines of, you know, inches is or centimeters in that plastic arena. But when we're setting these up, that each unit of measure is the simplest one for us to grab. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
I got a kick out of the fact that we both went there.
Well,
But
and again, it depends on the processes available and how we're buying those things. In this case, it may make
absolutely,
sense to do this from rod stock, but for someone else, they might buy these things in pre-cut lengths because they're able to save money and buy it in a pre-cut length and work with that as opposed to investing in the new equipment, which may be their ideal long-term roadmap for the processing, but it may not work today for them.
absolutely.
So it's completely valid depending on the company.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's that the takeaway of put something together, you go down the
Mm-hmm.
simple path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Going again in the parallels between the systems, which we're going to see in our ERP environments, is the parallels, right? Revision level. So this
Mm-hmm.
bill of material, I have it at Rev level 1.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, we have the ability to track revisions and see how many times it's changed, when it changed, etc. within GP.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar. Our effective date also
Mm-hmm.
very similar need around that bill of material.
Mm-hmm.
There is other change tracking available to us in GP, but that's a game for another day. Absolutely a
Mm-hmm.
game for another
Definitely.
day. Um,
Definitely. Definitely. And again, since you went down there on the changes, notifications for workflows,
mhm.
how do we handle that?
uh, within GP, we would also need to lean into another product in order to really bring that to light again,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of we can look for data objects changing, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
and process that through. There are
Mm-hmm.
workflows readily available within GP, but
Mm-hmm.
not all the way down to that rev level within a bill
Mm-hmm.
of material.
Well, and I think that's the important part of working with someone like us
Hmm.
is that we know what those best practices are, and we understand your business. We understand what the engineering workflows are and what you're instinctively going to need. Now, whether or not a young, immature company doesn't has that or not is irrelevant. We could recommend the best practices and the best tools for the job, whether it be in GP and we develop an internal workflow, whether we use an add-on product or whether we can integrate, something else, and God forbid customization. That's what you get from working with a consultant, is that we're going to give you that innovation to you, even though workflows are not necessarily the newest and greatest technology. To you, it's new
Hmm.
as a company and as an organization, and you may not have really thought that was a possibility because this is what we've always done, and that is the mindset. So that's why I want to have that conversation and talk about that,
Yep.
because if it's not there, it's just as important as if it is,
Well,
because it's an important consideration for us to help you.
and if we don't utilize workflow and notifications, right, our end users become overwhelmed by volume.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for us to do onesie twosies and look here in this list. It shows that I have this to do today.
Mm-hmm.
But now amplify that as our business grows and as the
Mm-hmm.
you know orders start kicking and we've got all this going on. Now I'm overwhelmed as an end user, and I need technology to boil that to the top of the list for me and say you've got to
Mm-hmm.
act on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of that other stuff that I think is pertinent when we talk around bill of materials in the past that I've experienced again is the ability to actually have a technical drawing, and
Mm-hmm.
have associated engineering information available. In GPE, we're able to associate those drawings to CAD systems, etc. I don't have good drawing software installed on my environment, so I linked it up to a very simple, good old Paint, right? Paint is always there for us guys, right? So my three components in my drawing are there,
Mm-hmm.
and again within that structure as well, um, we can add some logic around how that drawing changes as well as it evolves, right? That
Mm-hmm.
component may change over time with revisioning, et cetera. So we have that available as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's see, where Bob, you went into the actual MO, in the sense of the manufacturing order, meaning I want to make one of these. Again, I'm trying to navigate in a similar way from a list view. Not all our GP users realize that we have the Navi lists available to us, the navigation list,
Mm-hmm.
and they are more used to seeing things either from a menu driven or a palette driven. But trying to show that I can keep up with Bob on a good day here, and I can go generate a manufacturing order, with that item selected, and it brings it up and it's going to ask me, how many do I want to make?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of that same process. I'm a little challenged in my dummy environment. I got to make sure I get my dates right here. I got to be in the year 27, or it's going to tell me it's way long ago and you should have made this already. Um, Again, at this point in the game, I'm just making that one widget. I can schedule
Mm-hmm.
that MO. Oh goodness, I'm editing. So look at there. I have a routing open. I'm working on it. So it is not going to let me schedule this because somebody is modifying a routing. Let me get that
And I tell
close up.
you what, those little warnings can save some expensive manufacturing mistakes from
Yeah,
happening. So it's a nice
absolutely.
feature. Yeah, it
It is
seems
a nice.
inconvenient, but
Yeah, and it you know why that window was sitting open, gentlemen, right? Because I wanted to talk about it. But again, that routing flow where in GP we're actually assigning labor categories, setup time, machine time, the machine that may be being utilized, what is our move time, our cycle time. Maybe there is a retooling time that we've got to account for. So that's where we account for a lot of that is within our routing sequences.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just save that so I can schedule this bad boy. Now I can successfully schedule it, and I can build a pick list. Okay? And ultimately, again, right, I want to have the ability to go get these components from wherever they live prior and get them to my work center so that I can take action on them. In like Bob's case, we're going to either machine it, cut it, trim it, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Put it together, screw it together. So, and I believe that was where we were at, and I am in a quote. Let me release this. So again, you talked about different statuses on the
Mm-hmm.
bill of material.
Mm-hmm.
We have that as well in GP, but I didn't go into that. Again, the similarities are there. They definitely are. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what you see the most, what I see the most when I watch Bob versus when I work, um, the windows, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
sense that a lot of what Bob shows us is very list driven, and I actually
Mm-hmm.
have to try to make that happen. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
I'm in kind of window palette land here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a big part of what we're trying to do here is we're really our overarching objective is to demystify the platforms. If you know GP, you know GP. Now we demystify BC. Okay. If you know some other platform, then we demystify GP. I mean, that's really the point of this is to peel back the curtain a little bit. It's not an exhaustive tutorial. That's not the point. It's to let people see screenshots. Let people understand that the workflows are what's important. Let people understand that all of the fields are there for best practices, regardless of which platform you're using. And then we find that they're not that different after all.
Absolutely. Again, he had a reporting screen, all of the related MO reports, again, driven off of that manufacturing order.
Mm-hmm.
From that perspective, our pick list, and again, I set this up in a rather simplistic manner
Mm-hmm.
just so that it would flow, right? I can backflush those items. In other words, I don't actually have to go pick them. And within GP, if I do that, if I do the backflush, it's going to automatically assign a serial number, right?
Mm-hmm.
In reality, if we're working with serialized items, I need somebody to actually go physically pick it and tell me the serial number, right? I
You do.
cannot assume that it's the next one that was received.
Now, what does it mean to backflush? Let's not run past that.
In this case, it would just automatically consume those goods,
Okay.
right? I don't
Yep.
actually have to physically go process a picking ticket or
Mm-hmm.
a pick transaction within GP,
Mm-hmm.
right? But again, in this case, we couldn't we couldn't rightfully do that because I
Mm-hmm.
do need to know what serial number went into
You
this
do.
assembly so
You
that
do.
I can be responsible for finding that serial number, 6 months from now when somebody says which tibia piece went into that, right? Um, so that in this case we wouldn't backflush. If that makes sense.
It does.
Um, what else did Bob talk about that I'm missing?
Not
Completing.
much. The only
Not
thing
much.
the only thing we really got into was is we talked about the revisions, the difference between the bill of material revision and the
Yeah.
item revision, and I think we've covered that pretty well. Suffice to say, it's going to be
And,
very
and,
very
and again,
much
I
the
think
same.
I think when we talk the onesie twosies, right, and how things flow, that's one thing. But when you've got all the components that are going to go into that knee and a small one and a medium one and a large one, and they're all happening at the same time, that's where we need to be thinking about workflow and notification and ways to
Mm-hmm.
surface
Mm-hmm.
an employee's tasks as easily as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
next time we got to talk about phantom bombs.
Phantom bombs. I love phantom bombs.
That's a next time.
That's a little deeper. It's a little deeper conversation for sure, because of the scenarios in which they're used, and it's a lot of scenario as opposed to something that's markedly different in the way it's put together. So similar mechanics, different concept altogether. So
Absolutely.
very cool, very cool. All right, gents, do you have any closing thoughts before we get out of here and get back to work?
Oh, I guess again, I'm the newer person to that BC platform, and I'm finding it very intriguing that, everything I know um, translates. The terminology is translating. Where I would go to look for something, it seems like I shouldn't be intimidated by it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to keep going down this path and learning where the similarities are. I really am.
Yep. Bob, any thoughts?
Uh, I just like the look of um, GP actually. Not that I like it better than BC, but it's different than what I was expecting when we first started this.
Mm-hmm.
All the old Microsoft icons that I was familiar with their Office products, are right there. So it's easy to just get in and figure out what you need to do. So
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. Yep. And I think the takeaway that I'd like to leave folks with is that, based in the light of our recent commitment to support GP for at least the next 10 years, if you love your GP, clearly use it. And when you're darn good and ready, then you can consider making a switch. In the meantime, Turnkey Technologies has got your back. And if you're looking for a cloud solution, if you're coming out of the gate new and you want to consider BC, clearly it's going to do everything that you need it to do for your small manufacturing business, in this case, the scenario we're talking about today. And I think that's the beautiful part, is that you have these choices, and that despite what you might hear from announcements and that sort of thing, there isn't any pressure. We're here to support you. If you're an existing GP customer, we can continue to get you updates for security updates and that sort of thing. And it's already full featured. You're really not going to need some new latest and greatest technology or have that fed to you long before you may be ready, if ever. So I just think that's important both for the customer base, and whether it be ours or someone else's. You are in a great position that you can have your cake and eat it too. And if you're a GP fan, keep it for as long as you want. If you're ready for something different, we've got you.
Yep.
Gents, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time. Now let's go out and take care of those customers. And we'll see you next time in the Turnkey 365 ERP Academy.
Awesome.
all right, I enjoyed it. See you next time.